Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hire and Recruit at the U of M DEI Recruiting in a Virtual World panel. My name is Casey Johnson. I'll be sharing a few housekeeping items as some introduction information before we get started with our panel discussion. As a reminder, participants do not have audio or video sharing capabilities. A recording of this session will be available at a later date. And for submitting questions, you can send all questions for the panelists through the Q&A box, not the chat box. And these questions will be relayed to the panel and answered verbally as time allows. Your submitted questions are only visible to you and the moderators, so you cannot see others' questions. And with audio, if you're having trouble with the audio, you can test your audio on your phone or computer before the webinar, and double check that your speaker settings are turned on and the volume is turned up. And don't forget to join the audio on the webinar screen as well. So we'll get started. So thank you for joining us today for the 8th installment of our Hire and Recruit at the U of M webinar series. This session is brought to you by representatives from our university-wide employer engagement team and a group of our valued employer partners who have graciously volunteered to share their expert knowledge on DEI recruiting. You will meet the panelists in just a moment, but first let me recognize this webinar's planning team: Raquel Anderson of Career Services Administration, Emily Gasperlin at the College of Liberal Arts, and I'm Casey Johnson from the College of Biological Sciences. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is an ongoing process. So we're going to start with a poll to get a sense of where everyone is at. So Emily will launch our poll question here. Here are the questions. Which of the following best describes your organization's current DEI efforts? We haven't started and are not sure what our DEI practices will be. We are getting started and are currently evaluating our DEI practices. We have evaluated where we are at and are creating our DEI strategy. We are implementing our DEI strategy. We have established a DEI strategy. We have an established DEI strategy in place and are working on continuous improvements. Or I do not know what my organization has in place and I am here for personal development. And while you are all responding to the poll, I wanted to spend just a moment providing some background on our Hire and Recruit at the U of M webinar series. As I mentioned, this is our 8th webinar produced by a cross-campus team of employer-facing staff at the University of Minnesota. Our first 3 sessions, covering topics including navigating career services at the U, diversification of your workforce through international student hiring, and how to create successful internships, are posted on career.umn.edu, which you can see here. And a link will also be included in our recap email. You can find these sessions by clicking on the employer menu choice and then scrolling to the bottom of the page. We also want to say a sincere thank you to our panelists who represent an array of industries and organization sizes who were willing to spend an hour of their time sharing their insights and answering the questions that you have submitted. Now let's revisit the poll and see what our data is saying. Well, it looks like people are pretty spread out. We have a lot of people who have an established DEI strategy, some that are in the evaluating stage, but really very spread out across all of these stages. So it's very good to know. We hope that this helps to get a pulse on what's happening in the organizations that are represented in this audience. And it's helpful for our panelists as they answer questions, as well as for you all to see what your peers are considering as we continue to navigate diversity, equity, and inclusion in this virtual world. And to ensure that we're all starting in the same place with DEI, we're going to go through descriptions of diversity, inclusion, and equity. These descriptions were created with help from sources such as NACE and the University of Minnesota's Office of Equity and Diversity, and in consultation with our panelists. So to start, diversity focuses on the numbers. This is the makeup of your workforce, taking into account the many dimensions of diversity, including individual identities such as age, disability, education and background, major, that could include major, the college, the degree level, size, type, and location of school that they attended, ethnicity, gender, gender identity or gender expression, immigration status, military veteran status, national origin or nationality, race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, or any combination of these and or other identities. Inclusion focuses on creating an environment or workspace that welcomes, includes, values, and supports people across all dimensions of diversity. Inclusion is best measured and assessed from the employee perspective. So listening, evaluation, and willingness to change and innovate are key to fostering an inclusive workplace. You can measure inclusion by hosting focus groups and conducting employee surveys. Your retention numbers are also an insight into measuring inclusion. You can develop inclusion by fostering connections between employees, such as a mentorship program and providing employees with affinity spaces. At the University of Minnesota, we have affinity spaces for BIPOC, first-generation students, commuting students, and more. There are many ways that you can provide affinity spaces for people with shared identities. And equity recognizes that not everyone comes into the workforce from the same place or with the same resources and or support. As such, the equal provision of resources may not be enough to equitably support people across identities and dimensions of diversity. Consider the graphic from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that illustrates the difference between equality and equity. For example, the University of Minnesota Office of Equity and Diversity practices equity by centering underrepresented populations who face systemic barriers that impact their experience on campus, and specifically strives to serve and support the following individuals and groups at the University of Minnesota: American Indians and other indigenous populations, people of color, including underrepresented groups and new immigrant populations, people with both apparent and non-apparent disabilities, people who identify as women, people of various gender and sexual identities and expressions, and first-generation students. Now we have the pleasure of introducing today's panelists, starting with Marvin Banks from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. Marvin, will you please introduce yourself?
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Marvin Banks. I am currently one of the talent acquisition consultants for the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, which encompasses the state of Minnesota, the Dakotas, and also the state of Montana. Before that, I was in the HR space at the University of Minnesota as a talent acquisition consultant, and also one of the diversity inclusion recruiters. Within my day-to-day work, I am really the connection between the Federal Reserve Bank and also the community that we serve. So really being a connector, a bridge, and finding top talent and bringing them into our organization and making sure they have an opportunity to not only come into the organization, but also thrive and succeed as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you for being here. And next we have Patricia Isaac from the Office of Human Resources here at the University of Minnesota. Patricia, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course, Casey. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you. I am, as Casey said, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Consultant in the Office of Human Resources here at the University of Minnesota. I focus on the topics of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and am at a resource for all of our units and colleges here on campus and system-wide. I collaborate closely with the Office for Equity and Diversity. I co-facilitate two of the workshops that are presented, implicit bias in the search and selection process, and also addressing implicit bias and microaggressions. Previously, I had the privilege of working with my former colleague, Marvin Banks, as part of the talent acquisition team, as a recruiter, and then as a consultant, and now as a standalone focusing on the issues that I mentioned. I am a former paralegal and also head of a Spanish department in a private school here in the Twin Cities metro area. originally from Chicago, master's from CEHD. So I'm proud to be an alum of the university and ready to answer your questions. So thank you so much for having me once again.
Thank you, Patricia. And now we have Ann Maculate from Disability in Minnesota.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ann Maculate, and I am here representing Disability in Minnesota, but I'm actually wearing a lot of different hats today. So just to explain that, my day job is working for what we call the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development and Vocational Rehab Services. And our role is to assist individuals with disabilities in obtaining and maintaining jobs. And I also, more specifically on here, serve on the Disability in Minnesota board. And our organization is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a mission to promote best practices and enhance career opportunities for skilled candidates with disabilities. So that's another hat I wear. And in my past, I have done a lot of ADA consulting and accommodation work. I was an associate director over at United Health Group for 5 years doing accommodation and return to work tasks, and really think that all of those pieces today in our discussion are going to be important. So thrilled to be here, and it's great to see the great turnout.
Great, thank you so much, Ann. And finally, we have Ingrid Saba from Ovative Group. Ingrid, will you introduce yourself?
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Ingrid Saba, and I'm a senior analyst of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Ovative Group. In my current role, I support talent acquisition, onboarding at all levels, and I'm leading our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts for the org. Previously to Ovative Group, I was an enterprise diversity and inclusion for Wild Wings corporate, and I've had a number of internship experiences at different marketing and advertising agencies in town. I got my start in marketing with help from the Brand Lab, which is an awesome nonprofit based here in the Twin Cities, whose mission is to diversify the marketing and advertising industry. So with them, I was a student in their program and worked my way up, and I now serve as vice chair of their national board of directors. A bit more about my backstory. I'm actually a first generation college student, originally from Togo, which is a small country in West Africa. And I earned my bachelor's in strategic communications in the School of Journalism and completed a double minor in social justice and African American studies with the University of Minnesota. Go class of 2018 if anyone's out there. So I have to say that does not make me a DEI expert at all, but really excited to be here and part of the conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Ingrid. And now I will hand it over to my colleague Raquel to begin the panel discussion.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks all for being here today. We're really excited for this panel. We're going to start you out with a question for Ingrid. How are you preparing your current workforce to not only onboard diverse talent, but to also retain them?
For sure, huge question. I think our grounding start in that work is and kicking off DI at Ovative more formally. We created our mission, which reads that we are champions of change, fostering a culture inclusive of all dimensions of difference within and beyond our walls, to attract, inspire, and empower a diverse workforce. So all of our efforts to date need to ladder up to that mission, and we also have grounding principles and key assumptions that support a lot of our work. Kind of adopting the model that we will continue to work really hard to make Ovative a place where diverse talent can thrive and grow and want to be. But a lot of that work starts before they are hired with education and fostering an inclusive culture internally. So that's easy enough to say, but it takes a lot of different inroads and pathways. So just kind of getting started on the education front to even make that a successful story at Ovative.
Thanks, Ingrid. Are you guys working on policies or different things right now to enforce your DEI recruiting and retention processes?
I would say we aren't as formal as to be creating policies, so to speak, but getting practices and things like that in place, reducing bias within our interview processes from campus, so hiring interns or directors, not having names on our resumes has been a huge reduction in barriers to entry. We also don't require a college degree, which again, as you guys talked about, the different dimensions of diversity, social economic status and educational background being a dimension of that. So kind of reducing bias and barriers in upper funnel acquisition practices, and then getting more rigor around our sponsorship practices for international students has been huge for us as well. We are so grateful to be recruiting out of the U of M and other colleges. So sponsorship for students who aren't from here has been a hot topic to date. So we are making a lot of headway in that regard. And just kind of really investigating and critiquing ourselves in terms of like what isn't working and what is keeping people out, to make Ovative again a place that everyone is welcome.
Thanks, Ingrid. Anyone else before we move to our next question have anything to add? What are you doing to prepare your current workforce?
Well, I think for here at the Federal Reserve Bank, one of the things that we're doing to kind of prepare our workforce is a lot of things with that Ingrid has said, addressing biases, not only within the hiring process, but things that are happening before. So when you take a look at a job posting, are we using inclusive and diverse language to attract the talent that aligns to our mission, vision, and values within the Federal Reserve Bank? And if so, then great. If not, well, how can we be more inclusive, and how can we utilize some of that language to attract a wide audience base for the candidates and for the communities that we serve? Within FRB, the first four words within our mission statement is "We serve the people." And I think that's important, and especially something that's been passed down from our president, Neil Kashkari, to say, "We serve the people." And what that means is a whole host of individuals, not just from one particular group, but everyone that encompasses the region and the district that we serve. So taking a look at not only the job postings, but also our interviews, taking a look at some of those things. How do we measure in terms of getting specific numbers into our mid-management and director level opportunities for those individuals that are making those hiring decisions themselves? So there's a lot that goes into making sure that everyone is on the same page and eliminating as many barriers as possible.
Thanks, Marvin.
Yeah, Raquel, if I can just chime in here, everything that's been said, I echo. But it's also, it's very important to work on the current workforce. It really is. They have to be ready. I'm sure some of you have heard this. We hire for diversity, but then we onboard for, the fit. We want them to fit, and it's a culture that exists there already, and that pretty much does away with the diversity you brought. You bring people in because you want these different perspectives, you want new ideas, you want innovation in your unit or whatever it is that you're searching for. But then as soon as they attempt to do something, you say, well, that's not how we do it here. Here, let me show you how this is done. And all of that is basically sending the message of, well, thanks for being here, but we're not going to really value what you're going to bring to us and the potential you have. So we encourage you, and as we do this work, to really look at how they do things, and to realize that there are many ways to accomplish the same thing, and to be open and willing to take a chance. And yes, maybe what you will do is decide that maybe the original way is the one you want to follow, but at least through that process, you have opened other people's ability to see things through a different lens. So that our workforce today has to realize that they are key to this inclusivity of others.
Thanks all. Yeah, as Patricia implied, really, we don't want to have people reading between the lines. Transparency is key. So thank you all for highlighting that message. And now, Anne, how have you determined in both a virtual world and a physical world how accessible a space is for potential candidates or your current workforce?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there's a lot of things to kind of consider in this space, and certainly there are the legal compliance kind of areas. So for physical space, the ADA accessibility guidelines are really important to look at, comply with, and ensure that you have physical access, whether that be accessible bathrooms, to ramps, to a front door that might have an automatic door opener, all of those types of things. And I think one of the greatest things you can do in that process is sometimes involve a person with a disability who might be using a wheelchair to go around and see where access becomes a problem. That can be so critical, and you can really involve individuals, whether they're part of your employee resource group or just your employee population up front, and it can tell you a lot. You know, we've done that before, even for conferences we've hosted. Take your wheelchair, let's go around to all of what the hotel offers, and we found out a lot of glitches in that process and what we could give to the hotel to change before this big conference laid out. As far as virtual accessibility, there are a lot of things to consider for all learners, for all ways that people process information, and for effective communication. For the virtual space, it's really deciding how you want to approach accommodations, or even a universal design where you're just upfront providing things that would naturally work for all learners, all ages, regardless of disability or any other status. And so, you know, a lot of things with universal design might involve having a captionist up front like you're doing today. It might involve bringing an interpreter in and just having that effective communication right here and there. It's other things of etiquette that you might find that you don't do in a virtual space of like for interpreters, it's nice to introduce yourself first and say who's talking. You know, those are things that you can do, and to be mindful of, as in this virtual space, things that people might need breaks for physical or mental health reasons, and to allow for that time within webinars, or acknowledge that people might need to be off camera for any ways to manage stress or anxiety, or just life in general with what you have at home. So those are just some things to kind of be thinking of too, and making sure materials are accessible if you're doing that in a virtual space, that if you're sharing documents, that people who have screen readers can actually access it with their screen reader, or large print if you need it for visual reasons. A lot of different ideas.
Thanks, Anne. And Patricia, how have you worked with departments here at the U to ensure they have inclusive hiring practices?
Thank you. You know, they reach out to me. My title sort of makes it natural for them to reach out to me, but I don't work alone. We have some amazing talent acquisition consultants in Central Human Resources that are able to address these same, many of the same topics. So we, as Marvin said, it's considering that description, right? Making sure it's as inclusive as possible, looking at where is it that you're going to seek out this talent. If you always default to that same sort of listserv, you can be assured that you will get the same candidate that will be applying. So if you really want to increase that and broaden that, you have to go beyond that. And that's going to take a little work. I encourage units to establish relationships, because so much of this work, that's at the bottom. It's creating a relationship with another institution that is graduating students that are more diverse, right? Or connecting with the students that are at the institution that you like, and really creating that relationship so that they will share it with their networks. And I think we often believe that all of this has to be done so in a very formal manner. But when you think about it, the old way of hiring was done at country clubs, at golf courses, at women's groups, at places of worship, social environments. That is where the network lives. That is where the network communicates and shares. So yes, obviously, and definitely follow the listservs and the services that are out there, but do not forget those areas where they're based on relationships. And I believe that if you nurture those, you will really see results, but they have to be done in an authentic way. You cannot enter those relationships thinking that I'm going to get something out of this. It is because I am willing to share who I am. I am willing to open up and show my vulnerability and create a relationship authentically. And from that, then you will have results. So that's what I try to encourage units. It's not going to be done quickly, but it is something that I believe needs to be done. The other is to realize that there's a lot of work that we need to do on how we find talent, our search committees. We are looking at this, and many are too large. In trying to be inclusive of everyone, we believe that they need to be at that part of the search. And in reality, it's getting their input prior to the committee forming, right? So that then the committee members that information is shared with them, but it doesn't mean that that individual has to be present there. It often will slow down the process, and that means that you're losing candidates to others, such as my colleagues here. So, you have to be strategic about it. And so that is something that I would say. And again, I that onboarding is a very important aspect of it, because you're talking to them about retention right there. They are deciding as they're going through this process of welcome, here you are, this is how you blah, 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 all of that very formal language. You are telling them, we're investing in you and we want you to stay. We don't want you to stay here just for a year. We are going to set you up with this. This is what your position looks like in 3 years. This is, who we're going to pair you up with so you can ask questions. And then schedule right at that onboarding. In 6 months, you're going to be talking to these 2 individuals so that you can connect with them and see what else you want to learn, right? It's not about a review. It's about how can we help you keep growing here. That's a completely different message to someone as opposed to, let's see how you're doing. No, it's let's see where you can go. Completely different. So thank you.
A lot of
Completely different. Thank you. Actually, Ingrid, we have a specific question for you on this topic, and then want to hear everything else you have to add. Somebody asked if you said that you remove names from resumes, and how is this done? And at what point do they get to see the name?
Totally. So on our talent team specifically, we do all of the screening. So we have visibility to names, but within our hiring process, all other levels down do not get to see full names and contact info on their resume. So our HR team kind of takes the role of making those blind to kind of remove any biases for the hiring manager or the slate of team interviews or panel interviews that the candidate would go through. So names are just removed, but not invisible from the onset. So great question. And I can talk more in detail offline about how we do that. But I also wanted to just comment on Patricia's comments around being genuine in your hiring and acquisition process, and like building those relationships and being transparent within those relationships. I think it is a long game to build trust with candidates and to build trust as a company. Something that I have really appreciated Ovative and other companies for doing is practicing transparency around their team and demographic data. Folks are shy to share, but I think it's really important and a big step forward in holding ourselves accountable, our clients accountable potentially on like who's working on your end of things and what are you doing to kind of address the gap. I think that is a big demonstration of vulnerability for corporations and businesses that will resonate with client candidates down the line in terms of like BIPOC candidates want to know that you're doing the work and that the work isn't waiting for them once they are hired at your organization. So that's been something I've seen as of late that's made a huge impact.
Thanks for the ad. And Marvin, beyond recruiting, what do your current succession planning efforts look like? How are you maintaining a diverse talent pool?
I think that's I think that's an interesting question, because a lot of the times, well, 9 out of 10 times, we always focus on one side of the coin, which is the recruitment piece. But the opposite side of the coin, and probably the most important, is the retention piece. So how do we continue to keep our top talent within our organization? And even though that we would not be able to keep everyone, but how do we foster an environment to make sure everyone is welcome? And what does that really look like? So within that process, one of the best things that the Federal Reserve Bank has done since I've joined, since I joined them last June, was they paired me up with a what we call a Fed Start or a Fed Start buddy. And what that means is that it's someone that recently started at the Federal Reserve Bank, maybe around the same time that I've done, that I can sit down, connect with, and really just talk a little bit about the organization, things that he has done, how has he continued to move up within the organization, what is he doing kind of on his spare time. And that has been a fabulous resource for myself because I have not had the ability to really go into the office because we're at a work from home state. So just imagine you start a new career, a new job within an organization and not meeting any of your coworkers face to face. Everything has been virtual. So you don't understand kind of the landscape. You don't understand the environment. You don't understand kind of the culture that you might be walking into because you don't have those face-to-face interactions and you don't have those impromptu conversations as well. So that has been one of the fabulous resources that the Federal Reserve Bank has had. And to go with Ingrid and Patricia's point, the transparency and the authenticity within my manager and my supervisors, providing not only a 30, 60, and 90-day plan, but also a weekly check-in. Hey, how are you doing within this job? How are you doing within your career? What are you thinking about doing? Even to the point where the VP of Human Resources has said, hey, let's talk about what do you want to do within your career? Do you want to be here forever? Do you want to be here for a couple of days? What does that really look like for your career? To make sure that we are on the same page, and that authenticity has been very key. In terms of just overall retention and thinking about, well, what does that succession plan really look like? I mean, it goes back into pipelining. It goes back into thinking about how do we attract the new talent that is coming into the workforce. Last week, I had the opportunity to participate in Talent Acquisition Week, and they gave numerous different stats and resources on kind of the new workforce and what does that look like. About a year ago, around this time, everything was flipped on its head, where a lot of departments, a lot of organizations, a lot of areas would not even think about having a majority of their workforce work from home. That wasn't even an option for a lot of organizations. And now that we've been forced into kind of this work from home state, how do we make sure that we're inclusive to everybody? So whether that's sending them not only computers and also work phones, but maybe they need a personalized keyboard for disability reasons. Maybe they need a particular monitor to make sure it's easy on their eyes if they have some type of eye conditions or different things of that nature. But thinking about our workforce that is coming in, how do we create a pipeline for them to see a career trajectory? And what does that really look like? If you come in, for example, as a financial analyst one, and eventually want to be a financial director, what steps do you need to gain in order for you to move up? And how can we as an organization provide that information to allow you to continue to grow up and thrive within our current situation and current state for you to reach that goal? Or maybe you might come in and say, hey, I don't have the traditional HR background or traditional business analyst background, but eventually I want to get into that area. These are my transferable skills, and how can we help fill in those technical gaps that you might be lacking, but you might have all the transferable skills that are needed for the essence of that position. So really thinking not only internally, but also externally as we bring candidates in to the organization, thinking outside the box. How do we use those transferable skills? And I use myself as an example of first generation, low income, student coming into the U of M, graduated with a couple of degrees, worked at a couple of different areas before going into HR. I didn't have the traditional HR sense or traditional HR background, but what I did have was a particular skill set that allowed me to build relationships, that allowed me to critically analyze, that allowed me to make decisions quickly, that are the essence of the positions that I've been put in that have allowed me to continue to grow, the HR knowledge, the policy, and some of those other things come with time. So thinking of all that, all those pieces and putting them together, the transferable skills, putting in different programs to help onboarding and to help those new candidates in terms of retention, and also creating a strategic plan down a road for your employees as well.
Thanks, Marvin. We had a specific question for you about your Fed buddy. What is that individual's tenure? Did they start about the same time as you, or have they been with the bank much longer?
So oddly enough, this individual that I've been paired with was an intern for the Federal Reserve Bank for 3 different years. So back to back to back summers. And he recently became a full-time employee probably within the last 2 years. So really fairly new within their career, and thinking about, hey, how can they, what are some of the common bonds that we might have? We're around the same age, going kind of through the same struggles, going through the same life transition. So that ability to really sit down and connect and build that relationship with one another has been fantastic, where I can be authentic and ask them questions in terms of, hey, how do you navigate this space? What does this really look like? How do you be successful? And I can get an honest answer, and so I can make that decision as we move forward.
Thanks for adding that. And Ingrid, did you have something else to add to succession planning here?
Not succession planning exactly, but a lot of things that Marvin said resonated with me. And also, as someone not coming from the HR background specifically, like being a people person has gotten me pretty far. And I wanted to just double click on what Marvin shared about, like just checking in, whether it's from a manager or a peer or what have you, just like an established connection, like that can do so much in terms of like connectivity and like fostering inclusive relationships. I think especially at this time where we're living through one major historical moment after another, and people are dealing with like the lasting impacts of that, like literally just checking in on someone and asking like, how are things going, can go a really, really long ways. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything else to say on this one?
This is Anne. I would just add as well, when you think about individuals with disabilities, I think sometimes people are always just thinking about the first steps of getting that individual employed, and they often feel it's starting entry level. You know, as we talk about retention, as we talk about succession planning, all of this applies too, is just to really make sure that first you're setting expectations high for people with disabilities coming in, and that you don't rule out positions that they can't perform, even if their disability is obvious and you feel like it affects what you believe to be the essential function of the job. And second, on the retention is so critical to keep involving individuals, employees who have with disabilities in the discussion about where do they want to go in the company, and just don't undersell that it's a really important piece.
Thanks, Anne. With respects to creating an inclusive work environment for candidates with disabilities, what resources would you recommend? And what resources does Disability In offer?
So I'm going to probably handle those both in one. So I'm going to recommend some Disability In resources. I would say there's some really great resources out there for you to take advantage of, and I'll put my little plug in for Disability In. So we have our website, which I'm sure they our facilitators can put in the chat. It's www.di-mn.org. And on our website, there's some really great opportunities to look at resources that might help you in your journey. If you go on the site, there's a resource tab up top, and then there's a Disability In resources, though we have many in there. We have like our business case to other things that might help you as you figure out where you are in your journey. And I was kind of impressed where everybody was in this journey today. So that's great too. But we have a tool at our national level called the Disability Equality Index. And it's a really great tool that's a benchmark tool that helps people build kind of a roadmap for measuring and getting tangible action that they can do to drive disability inclusion. And it falls in a lot of different categories. So it kind of assesses your culture and your leadership. It looks at enterprise-wide accessibility and access. It looks at your employment practice. it looks at your community engagement and diversity supplier space as well. So what you do is you take this tool and get a score, and if you get 80 and above, you are recognized as a best place for work for disability inclusion. But one thing that I would say, so typically when we're encouraging this tool, it comes up annually. It's usually individuals or businesses that are 500 employees or more. But the nice thing, and it does involve membership to our national organization or cost, but for those that don't have those resources or that are smaller in nature, you can take this tool and you can go out to our national site as well and see the questions that are involved and really evaluate where you're at in your journey against those questions and what things really apply to you. So it's a very transparent tool to be able to walk through what is needed for you to further drive what you value for disability inclusion and what is important, and to get a benchmark. So that's one. We also have a resource called Disability Inclusion Getting Started, and it's a simpler form than our Disability Equality Index is pretty extensive, but this is kind of a smaller form that's more of a checklist thing to walk through in each of those areas, and will at least get the juices flowing about things, where you sit in your disability inclusion journey and what additional things you can be paying attention to as you develop your strategic plan.
Thanks, Anne. As we're talking about resources here, Ingrid, you had some resources you were going to mention?
Absolutely. As a product of the Brand Lab, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a whole lot about them and their mission and their impact. Again, the Brand Lab is a nonprofit based here in the Twin Cities whose mission is to diversify the marketing and advertising industry. And they do this by providing diverse students in high school with internship opportunities even before graduation. They also have a college and beyond program for diverse and BIPOC students to get internship support, mentorship support, and different resources to kind of help support that education in the industry journey. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to them. Aside from the internship program and like connecting with students and being a mentor, providing resources, they also have a Fearless Workshop program too. So if your organization is looking for trainings around unconscious bias, workplace inclusion and things like that, they also provide workshops, and they can come in with a really awesome and personable team and walk your organization through that. I can't say enough about the Brand Lab. They are absolutely amazing. They also have a conference coming up in a couple of weeks that will be virtual. So if you see flyers and things like that over LinkedIn, definitely encourage you all to sign up and attend. I would also like to share, like in terms of DI resources on the whole, there's so much out there. The Woke Coach is a great resource. Mosier is an LGBTQIA inclusion nonprofit that helps employers better support the LGBTQIA team members. But beyond all of those different resources, I think if you are going out and doing research, you will find a ton. But what's most important, I think, is going out there with a lens of what you're looking to find. Otherwise, you'll get super overwhelmed with all of the different resources. But I would also encourage folks not to overlook their current team. I think the people who you currently work with are probably your best resource, to be honest. A big priority of mine's and Ovative's is that, like, as we are kind of moving along on this journey, not to build something that is disingenuous to who we are and what our culture is about. And that can really only come from the inside, so to speak. So finding folks who are passionate about this and getting folks into a room to, again, develop a mission, grounded principles, key assumptions of like what you are wanting to build, I think is really valuable in building something, again, genuine and authentic to your respective company culture. Not to say there aren't amazing consultancies and things like that that can give you ideas and just getting started. But I think doing some of the heavy lifting will make for a better impact long term. But again, tons of resources out there, and I'll open it up to Marvin and Patricia too to share.
Thanks, Ingrid. Patricia, when we last spoke, you had mentioned your team is doing a 21-day challenge. Are you able to share that resource with everyone?
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, Coupa HR sort of revised or added some components to the original by Dr. Eddie Murphy and Debbie Irving, the 21-day equity racial equity challenge habit. So what it is you do something for 21 days that will help you to form a new habit. And we all know that really that's part of it, right? It's that we have to change the way we think, the way we act, the way we say things. So we did it in Central Human Resources. We went through it and we culminated it with an hour and a half sort of debrief on it, where we invited all of our staff to attend, and we had some questions, and we went into breakout rooms and we had a discussion, and it was really interesting, and just to see how many participated in it, and also that they were willing to then attend the debrief, or able to attend it, because sometimes it's scheduling more than anything. But I do believe that to do something like that as a group has really positive outcomes. We now are, we have an inclusion council in Central Human Resources, and we're sharing, videos that we now see, articles. So it really has sparked an interest outside for individuals to just follow their own journey. And I think that's really important. So yeah, and the 21-day challenges are out there. As I said, this one was tailored a little bit more for human resources, but there are many out there and they're all just wonderful. So I would highly recommend it for a group to go through it together.
Awesome, thank you. Before we move on topics here, Marvin, any other resources you want to share that you're utilizing in your role?
Yep. So I love the Brand Lab, and Brand Lab has a great partnership with one of the organizations I also represent as well, Make It MSP. So within Make It MSP, one of the things that we do is really from an economic standpoint of recruiting and retaining top talent within the Twin Cities. And what does that look like? There were numerous different studies and numerous different resources that they have at their disposal. Well, back in 2016, there was a study that went out that talked about why do, especially people of color, why do they leave the Twin Cities area and why do they stay within the Twin Cities area? And there were a lot of different resources and a lot of different viewpoints, but there were 6 main points that came from that study. 2018, they circled back and redid the survey again at kind of a smaller scale. And there were some improvements, but there are still a lot of things that were still lacking from a professional of color standpoint in that area. So Make It MSP has done tons of different things to recruit, but also retain the top talent. Things such as creating a toolkit for new employers to help them with their diversity and inclusion efforts. That toolkit includes different strategic or strategy advisors that can come in and perform different workshops that specialize in these areas. Different market research that talks about why is it hard for people to find friends, or one of the biggest things that I found most interesting is finding a significant other if you're moving here from a different state. So finding out those different things and building those resources into the different programs and different plans. In a pre-COVID world, one of the things that they did was a lot of meet and greets or social gatherings at some of the Fortune 500 companies that we have within the Twin Cities. Places at Ecolab or Wells Fargo or Medtronic, where individuals that probably would never communicate with one another had the opportunity to be in the same room and build those relationships, build those meaningful connections, understand some of those powerful networks that are needed for someone to move up within their organization. So Make It MSP has a lot of different resources and a lot of different things at their disposal that I would definitely recommend to people to take a look at if they need help in their D&I initiatives and recruitment and retaining as well.
Thanks, Marvin. We had a question come in that Ingrid is going to address for us now.
I thought the question about whether you're in a small company where you may be a onesie or one woman or one person of color, et cetera, and kind of how to navigate that. I think similarly to what Marvin was talking about with like make it MSP, being the only is really tough in any organization. And I think if you are able to, with like open roles or open positions, I make it a personal responsibility to refer folks from my own personal network that I would be really excited to work with, but then also fostering connections outside of my workplace to kind of supplement, again, some of that connectivity and having relationships in the professional sense with folks who identify similarly has been just a passion project on the side, I would say, but finding more formal like institutions and like networks and things like that, where you can just kind of have a safe space and talk about that experience of being BIPOC in the industry has been huge and really important. There was an aspect of the question around framing that experience as an opportunity versus a liability when it comes to hiring. And I think the business case for more diversity is out there and can be reviewed, but I would bring it back to the business case in terms of what clients is your business serving, and more often than not at the end of that, it's probably a diverse group of people, and if that's not represented within your team and within your working staff, like you have a gap. And I guess at the end of the day, leaving money on the table, even though I hate that phrase. So I think kind of just like making that a spotlight and a priority for your hiring team is kind of imperative. So say that.
Thanks for adding that, Ingrid. We have about 10 minutes left. We had a very long list of questions and are not getting to all of them, but it's such a great conversation. I love where it's heading. So in our last 10 minutes, we would definitely want to make sure we're focusing on virtual. Ingrid, I'll start with you. How are you sharing your company culture virtually? And then everybody else, if you have anything to add, please do so.
Yes, sharing our company culture virtually, I think, has been a huge opportunity for folks who are really big on happy hours and getting together pre-pandemic. In this time, we've taken opportunity to get tighter and better about telling our story, whether it be like through videos or different posts through social media, and just kind of like letting folks know where we are at as an organization. But in terms of keeping the culture alive internally, we've adopted a couple of really cool series where we invite stand-up comics in to do something over Zoom, performances every Thursday night. We have a Thursday night music series at Ovative, and with this month being Black History Month, Black History shouldn't be celebrated just this month, but always. We've had different African-American and Black artists come in and perform, which has been awesome. Just like creating different forums and different avenues for people to engage and connect, both formally and informally, whether it be just a calendar hold on a Thursday afternoon for folks to come in and chat, or 15 minutes on a Tuesday for folks to get coffee. I think just creating opportunities and spaces for people to do so has been just huge for our culture, and whether or not you take advantage of it or not, I think having the choice to do so has been really great for folks.
Awesome. You all are also doing some things with some software platforms and keeping the communication open internally, if I remember correctly, utilizing Slack and other things like that.
Yes, there's so many things I forget to mention because they're so normalized to me, but Slack is huge for us, Teams, Zoom. We recently got Oculuses, like the VR headsets, as a corporate, like a gift for our holiday party. So we now can meet in the virtual world, which is super bizarre and feels like living in a Black Mirror episode, but super cool to connect with the avatars of my coworkers. So tech is huge for us.
Thanks for adding that. Anyone else, what are you doing right now to ensure company culture virtually?
So within the Federal Reserve Bank, some of the things that we're doing, we're having, of course, all the Zoom meetings, but pre-Zoom meetings, we take kind of 10, 15 minutes to do some unique and fun things. So one of the activities is kind of a connecting activity that's led by different members of the different teams. So when it came around to me, it was around the Thanksgiving holiday. And, we just talked about, hey, what is the most underrated and overrated Thanksgiving food, right? And to get a lot of people's connections and a lot of people's answers, which the correct answer is turkey, by the way. It was very good to kind of connect and get to know some of your colleagues and some of your individuals. On top of that, the smaller groups where we would just have bi-weekly check-ins and, hey, bring a bag, bring something to snack on, open up your bag and tell me your life in a bag. What does that look like, right? What is important to you? And I have those things to, once again, connect with your employees and connect with your coworkers is very good, especially once again for myself that started in the midst of the pandemic and didn't have the opportunity to meet people face to face. And I think that's one of the downfalls of not being kind of within the office on a day-to-day basis. So those particular things and being conscious and making that concerted effort of, hey, we have our work time that things have to get done, but let's spend 30 to 45 minutes to really try to get to know each other, whether through bingo or other different games that you can play. Don't have the Oculuses, don't have the stand-up comedians like Ingrid has coming in, but some of the other areas that we can continue to expand upon.
Awesome. As we think about company culture, I also think about collaboration, and your team is working on creating some videos for the general public. Do you want to talk about collaborating?
Awesome. Yes, I'd love to talk about that. So, and I'll try to be kind of the time. So this is out of a partnership with Voc Rehab Services and a Southern group called Maxability that's connected to Mayo. We are actually creating bite-sized learning, disability inclusion learning modules is what we're calling them. They're meant to be 15 minutes or less, and along various topics like just, what is a disability under the ADA, reasonable accommodation. We're talking about self-identification, self-ID campaigns, or testimonials that you want to create within your business to show more of that value that you have on disability inclusion and who is created in your employee population. So we're really excited about that. We're going to be having that more visible out on our state career force site. And we'll share more and kind of promote that in all our channels that we can. But they're meant to be team activities and are brought to your team in like a huddle and digesting the 15-minute of content and then having kind of a takeaway card where you actually have more meaningful discussion about what you just heard and process it in a lot of different ways so that we can have those conversations about disability inclusion. So thank you for that.
Thanks for adding in. Patricia, anything else to add that you're working on creating the culture virtually?
I think with this is it's given everybody an opportunity to really revisit their website, right? And to really think about it in a very different way, because that may be the only way for some time still to come that someone can connect with you and who you are and what your unit or department or company, whatever it is. And it's about in a very strategic way, letting them know how these issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion are important to who you are and how they're more than just those few lines on an application that they adhere to this. It's really an opportunity for everyone to say, how is it that we value everyone? How is it that we make everything accessible for everyone? And this is what we're doing in these areas because we're also on a journey. So and I tell, our colleges and our units here at the university that is something that we should all be looking at, including OHR. So yes. We live in a different world, and I don't think it's going to go away completely. So this is a good investment.
Thank you. Yes, websites is a easy place to start. Reevaluate that first. I think we could continue this conversation for another solid hour, but we don't have that time. So Ingrid is going to address one more question here, and then Casey's going to close us out.
Yeah, there was a question around diversity as it centers whiteness and others and anyone who's not white. And I haven't read the article that you're referencing, but I think that even the transition from POC to BIPOC is huge, and how we like leverage language. I think what's really important is that we continue to see people as they are, and like people of color aren't a monolith. So if you are developing a hiring or inclusion strategy or what have you, like be specific on who this audience is. Like, is it Black people? Is it Indigenous people? Is it people who are Hispanic, LGBTQIA, what have you? I think bucketing everyone into this like bucket of difference and not identifying or addressing them specifically will only harm your efforts in the long term. So I think calling things as they are and practicing a bit more candor and transparency is what resonates the most with me in that comment. So.
Great. Well, thank you all. We hope that this session has been helpful for you. And in just a few minutes after we close this out, we'll be sending out a post-event email, which will include an experience survey for this event. So please share your feedback with us so that we can continue to deliver content that is of the best quality and applicability for you and your organization. We'll also have the resources that our panelists mentioned in that email. And as we wrap up, I encourage you to take notes of a couple of these additional resources that you might find helpful. You're welcome to take a screenshot of these links, but again, they'll be included in that recap email from us. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Be safe and well, and have a great week, everyone.